Rafik had lived in the small town for many years, but he never liked how quickly people looked away when something difficult happened around them. The town was peaceful on the surface, full of shops, tea stalls, farmers, and families who greeted each other every morning. But behind that friendly greeting, most people believed in minding their own business. If someone fell, they looked away. If someone was in trouble, they said, "It's not my concern." And if someone became weak or dependent, they quietly backed away until that person was forgotten. Rafik had always stayed different. He was a simple carpenter who spent his days shaping wood, repairing broken doors, making chairs, and building shelves. He did not have much money, but he had something most people in the town had lost a long time ago. He felt responsible when he saw someone suffering. He could not walk past a hungry animal or a crying child, and recently he had started hearing strange whispers around the market. Whispers that made him feel uncomfortable every time he heard them. People kept talking about a woman who lived alone at the far end of town in an old house that looked ready to collapse. At first, Rafik thought the talks were exaggerated, just more gossip to pass time. But as days passed, the stories became more troubling. They said the woman could not move properly. They said she was paralyzed. They said she had no one. Some people even laughed about it like it was something amusing. Rafik hated that the most. He wondered how anyone could talk lightly about someone's pain. One afternoon, while repairing a broken window frame in the marketplace, he overheard a conversation between two shopkeepers. They spoke casually, like the topic did not carry any weight at all. One said, "I passed by that house yesterday. That poor woman is still alive. I don't know how." The other replied, "No one is going to help her. Everyone has their own responsibilities. Helping her is a waste of energy." They laughed afterward, not realizing someone was listening quietly from the corner. Rafik felt a tightness in his chest. It bothered him for hours. He thought about it while he packed his tools. He thought about it on his walk home. And he thought about it when he sat alone in his small room at night. Something was wrong. Something felt deeply unfair. How could everyone accept that a person was lying helpless with no one to care for her? The next day, he asked one of the vegetable sellers about the woman. The seller lowered his voice as if he were telling a joke. "Her name is Syra. She used to live with her relatives. But after she became paralyzed, they left her. They said she brings too much trouble. She can't work, so she is a burden." Rafik could not understand how people could speak like that. A human being was not something to throw away. That evening, when he finished repairing a farm gate outside town, he decided he would not listen to any more talk. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The road toward the abandoned house was quiet, covered with dry leaves and dust. As he walked, the houses became fewer, and the path looked more neglected. Soon, he reached a lonely structure made of cracked walls, a half-broken roof, and a wooden door hanging loosely from its hinges. He stood outside for a long moment, unsure what he would find inside. The air smelled of dryness and silence. The house looked like it hadn't been touched in months. He knocked softly at first, then a little louder. No answer came. Rafik pushed the door gently, and it opened with a long creak. Inside, the room was dim. Dust floated in the air. Light from the setting sun entered through a broken window, falling on a single bed pushed against the wall. Rafik stepped inside carefully, afraid of disturbing anything. Then he saw her. Syra lay on the bed covered with a thin blanket that looked far too old to provide warmth. Her face was pale, and her hair was undone, falling over her shoulders like she had not combed it in weeks. Her eyes widened when she noticed someone enter. For a moment she struggled to sit up, but her body refused to obey. She finally gave up and lay still, staring at him with fear and shame. Her voice came out weak, barely more than a whisper. "Please, Don't hurt me. I can't defend myself." Rafiq stepped back immediately, raising his hands gently to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to trouble you. I heard that you might need help. That's why I came." Syra blinked in disbelief. Most people avoided her house like a cursed place. Some children threw stones at the door for fun. She had learned not to trust sudden visitors. But something in Rafiq's quiet tone softened her fear. He glanced around the room. There was no food. The floor had not been swept in months. A small water jug was empty. Her clothes were folded in a corner, untouched. Everything showed how long she had been surviving without support. Syra spoke slowly, her voice shaking. "Everyone left. I used to live with my uncle's family. When I got sick, when I lost movement, they said they couldn't take care of me. They dropped me here and walked away. I thought someone would come. No one did." Her words hit Rafiq like a stone. He felt anger rise, not at her, but at everyone who had allowed this situation to exist. He took a few steps nearer, but kept his distance so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. "How long have you been living like this?" he asked softly. "I've forgotten the days," she replied. "Sometimes I sleep for a long time because I have no strength. Sometimes I wake up and wonder if the roof will fall on me." Rafiq looked at the broken ceiling and realized it wasn't an exaggeration. The structure was weak, and rain could easily get in. He wondered how she had survived this long. She studied his face with tired eyes. "You'll leave too," she said quietly. "Everyone does. People come once, out of curiosity. Then they never return." Rafiq felt something tighten in his heart. He shook his head slowly. "I won't leave you alone like this." She looked confused. Hope was something she had given up long ago, and hearing such words felt almost painful. He reached into his bag and took out a small metal cup he always carried. He went outside, filled it with water from the hand pump near the road, and returned. She watched him with disbelief as he gently lifted her head, placed the cup near her lips, and helped her drink. She drank slowly, like she hadn't tasted water in days. "You must be hungry," he said. She didn't reply, but the answer was clear. He didn't have food with him then, but he promised, "I'll bring something tomorrow morning. Warm food. You won't stay hungry anymore." She stared at him, still unsure whether to trust him. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Rafiq paused before answering. "Because someone should have helped you long ago. Because you don't deserve to suffer alone. And because if I walk away now, I won't be able to sleep at night." For the first time in months, Syra felt a small tear fall from her eye, not from pain, but from relief. She turned her face away, embarrassed to cry in front of someone. But Rafiq understood her silence. He repaired her door before leaving, tightening the screws so wild animals wouldn't enter at night. Then he cleaned the floor around her bed, clearing the dust as much as he could with his hands. It wasn't much, but it was more than anyone had done recently. Before stepping out, he said softly, "I'll come back. I promise." Syra nodded slowly, though her heart still feared he might forget her like everyone else. But something in his voice felt real, something she had not felt in a long time: sincerity. Rafiq walked back through the darkening road, the image of her lonely face staying in his mind for the rest of the night. He knew life would not be simple for her. He knew the road ahead was long, but he also knew one thing with complete clarity. He would return the next morning, and the morning after that, and for as long as it took. Because from the moment he walked into that broken house, he understood that helping Syra was no longer a choice. It had become his responsibility, one he accepted without hesitation. The next morning arrived before Rafiq's alarm could ring. He barely slept through the night, thinking again and again about Syra lying alone in that broken house. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her weak face, her thin hands, her frightened expression when he entered the room. It bothered him in a way he could not fully explain. So before the sun rose completely, he packed some warm food from a nearby stall, filled a bottle of clean water, carried a small bag of tools, and began walking toward her house. The air was cool, and the sounds of morning birds echoed across the quiet road as he took steady steps. When he reached the lonely house, he found the door still closed. He had fixed it well last night. He knocked gently to avoid startling her. Inside, he heard a faint voice say, "Who is it?" "It's me," he replied softly. "Rafik." There was a short silence, as if Syra could not believe he came back so early. Maybe not at all. Then she whispered, "You returned?" He opened the door slowly and stepped inside. The room still looked old and dusty, but something felt different today. Maybe because he brought a sense of life with him. "I brought breakfast," he said, showing the small metal tiffin. The warm smell of rice and lentils filled the room. Syra's eyes widened with surprise, but she said nothing. She simply watched him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. He placed the food on a small wooden stool near her bed, then washed his hands using water from the bottle. After that, he helped her sit up gently, supporting her back with his arm. She was extremely light, as if she had lost far too much weight. Her body trembled slightly, but with his help, she managed to sit upright. He fed her slowly, taking care not to rush. She ate quietly, each bite restoring a little strength in her pale face. After a few minutes, she closed her eyes and whispered, "No one has fed me in months." Rafik looked at her, confusion and sadness mixing in his heart. "You've been eating alone all this time?" "I didn't always have food," she answered softly. "Sometimes I crawled to the corner to find something someone left. Sometimes I went 2 days without anything. I thought I would not survive." Her words struck him deeply. He looked around the room again, realizing how much she had endured without complaining. The broken walls, the dirty floor, the tiny window letting in cold air. It was no place for anyone, especially not someone in her condition. After finishing her meal, she drank some clean water. Her hands shook, so Rafik held the cup for her. When she finished drinking, she leaned back against the pillow he placed behind her. "You look better already," he said gently. She gave a small smile, the first one he had seen on her face. "It feels strange to eat warm food again," she murmured. Rafik spent the next hour cleaning more of the room. He swept the floor, wiped dust from the window, and folded her clothes neatly. Then he stepped outside to examine the broken parts of the house. The roof had several holes. The wooden planks around the window were loose. Even the door frame needed reinforcement. He realized that if he didn't fix these soon, rain and wind would continue to make her condition worse. When he re-entered the room, Syra was watching him with curious eyes. "You don't have to do all this," she said quietly. "You already helped more than anyone." Rafik shook his head. "I want to do it," he said firmly. "I can't leave you to live in a place that's falling apart." She lowered her gaze, almost shyly. "People will talk," she said. "They already say things about me." He smiled politely. "Let them talk. They talk about everything when they don't understand it." Syra did not argue further. She simply nodded, accepting that his heart was set on helping her. Later in the morning, Rafik left for a few hours to complete small carpentry jobs he had committed to earlier. But even while working, his thoughts kept returning to Syra. Her loneliness, her strength, her helplessness, all of it stayed in his mind. So as soon as he finished the last job, he picked up extra food, bought a bar of soap, and returned to her house in the late afternoon. When he arrived, she seemed surprised again. "You came twice in one day?" she asked quietly. Rafik smiled. I said I would take care of you. He brought in a small bucket of water, cleaned her hands and face gently, and changed the bedsheet on her mattress with a spare one he carried. It was a simple white sheet, but it made the room look cleaner and brighter. You must feel a little fresh now, he said as he finished. Syra touched her clean face lightly, as if she wasn't sure it was real. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me, he replied. Just get better. For the next few days, Rafik visited her every morning and evening without fail. Sometimes he brought cooked vegetables, sometimes bread, sometimes rice. He always brought water, knowing she couldn't manage to get any. Each day, he repaired a small part of the house. One day, he fixed the door completely. The next day, he patched the cracks in the wall. On another day, he sealed the gaps in the window frame. He worked silently, but his presence filled the house with a sense of security that Syra hadn't felt in years. As time passed, Syra began to open up. She talked about her childhood, how she used to laugh easily and run in the fields behind her uncle's house. She told him how she dreamed of studying further, maybe becoming a teacher. But then she told him about the day her legs began to weaken, how she fell one afternoon and couldn't get up, how the doctor gave her medicines but they didn't work, how her uncle's family slowly became frustrated with her need for care, how one evening they left her here in this old house and never returned. Rafik listened carefully, never interrupting. He let her speak for as long as she wanted. Sometimes she cried softly, and he waited patiently until she calmed down. He treated every word she spoke as precious, because he understood she had carried this pain alone for too long. One evening, when he was repairing the roof, a group of neighbors walked by outside and whispered loudly enough for Syra to hear. That Carpenter spends too much time there, one man said. Why is he wasting his energy? Said another. Maybe he has nothing better to do, someone laughed. Syra flinched at their words. She looked embarrassed and upset, but Rafik simply continued hammering the wooden plank, pretending he didn't hear them. When he came down the ladder, Syra looked at him with worried eyes. People will keep gossiping. Maybe you should come less often, she said with a trembling voice. He sat on a stool near her bed and looked at her calmly. If I stop coming because of what people say, then what kind of person am I? He asked gently. Your comfort is more important than their words. Her shoulders relaxed a little and she lowered her gaze. No one has ever said something like that to me, she murmured. Rafik smiled softly. Then it's about time someone did. Over the next week, Syra's strength began to improve. Not physically in big steps yet, but emotionally. She looked forward to Rafik's visits. She smiled more often. Her voice became stronger. She started eating better. And slowly she began to trust that he truly meant to help her without expecting anything in return. One day, Rafik brought something special, a wooden support board with small handles, custom made for her. This will help you sit up more easily, he explained. Syra looked at the board, running her fingers over the smooth, polished wood. You made this for me? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Yes, he replied. I thought it might make things a little easier for you. She held the board like it was the most precious gift she had ever received. Her eyes filled with tears, but not from sadness. This time it was from a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. Rafik noticed her quiet emotion and pretended not to see the tears, giving her the space she needed. I'll bring something else tomorrow, he said lightly. Something to help you move your legs gently. She nodded, unable to speak. As he walked out of the door that evening, Syra watched him go with a soft expression she had not worn in years. She felt safe, cared for, and no longer invisible. Rafik's steps were slow as he walked home, but his heart felt fuller than it had in a long time. Helping Syra was no longer just kindness. It had become a promise he made to himself, a promise he intended to keep. Days turned into weeks, and Rafiq's visits became a natural part of Sarah's life. Each morning, she listened for the quiet knock on the door, the gentle sound that assured her she was not alone anymore. Every time he stepped inside with food, water, or tools, her heart felt lighter. She had spent so long thinking she was forgotten by the world that the idea of someone choosing to care for her still felt unreal. But Rafiq kept showing up, and with every visit, he made her believe a little more in the goodness she thought no longer existed. Rafiq began studying her condition carefully. He had no medical knowledge, but he noticed small changes. Her hands started moving more steadily. Her voice became clearer. Some days, she managed to sit up with only a little support. These tiny improvements filled him with pride, like watching a fragile plant grow after being neglected for too long. But one afternoon, when he tried to take her to the town clinic for proper medical advice, they faced a new challenge. The nurse at the clinic recognized Syra and immediately shook her head. "She still has unpaid bills from a long time ago," the nurse said bluntly. "She cannot receive treatment until those are cleared." Rafiq felt a wave of frustration. It wasn't Syra's fault that she was abandoned. She hadn't even left the house in months. She couldn't even walk. Yet the system refused to help her. He asked politely, "Isn't there any way to help her without payment first?" The nurse shrugged like she had no emotional involvement. "This is the rule. If you want treatment for her, you must pay her past bills plus the new costs." Rafiq walked out of the clinic with Syra's old papers in his hand and a heavy heart. The amount was far more than he had. He had saved some money from his carpentry jobs, but it was not enough. As he walked back toward her house, he kept thinking about how unfair life had been to her. She had lost her family, her health, and even basic support from people who should have helped without hesitation. When he entered her house, Syra saw the sadness in his eyes immediately. "They refused, didn't they?" she asked softly. He didn't want her to feel discouraged, so he simply said, "They want the old bills paid. But don't worry. I'll find a way." Syra looked at him with concern. "You already do so much. Don't carry more weight because of me." Rafiq shook his head. "You did nothing wrong. You don't deserve to suffer for the mistakes of others." That night, he sat on his small bed at home and calculated every possibility. If he worked long hours, he could gather some of the money, but it would still take time. He didn't want Syra to wait too long, but he also knew he had no other options. So the next day, he went from shop to shop asking for extra carpentry jobs, anything he could do. Some shopkeepers agreed, offering him tough tasks no one else wanted, repairing broken storage rooms, building shelves from scratch, fixing old wooden carts. The work was exhausting and he barely had time to rest, but he never complained. Every evening, after long hours of work, he still visited Syra with the same calm smile as always. She never saw how tired he truly was. She only saw the man who kept coming with warm food, fresh water, and quiet encouragement. One evening, when she noticed his hands shaking slightly while feeding her, she asked, "Are you okay?" He nodded quickly and said, "Just tired from work. Nothing to worry about." But she knew the truth. She knew he was pushing himself harder than ever. The thought made her both grateful and guilty. She wanted to tell him to rest, but at the same time, she didn't want him to stop helping her. Because without him, she would fall back into the darkness she had escaped only because of him. Slowly, Sarah began showing improvement. Rafiq taught her small movements she could practice. He placed a soft cloth in her hands and encouraged her to squeeze it a little each day. He taught her how to lift her arms slowly and gently. Every improvement was tiny, but they mattered. One afternoon, while helping her sit up, she managed to lift her back with her own strength for a few seconds. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Did I just Do that? Rafiq smiled proudly. Yes, you're getting stronger. Syra. She felt a warm wave of happiness fill her chest. I haven't felt this much hope in years, she whispered. But while Syra's strength grew, the attitude of the townspeople remained unkind. Some would look at Rafiq with suspicious eyes as he carried supplies toward her house. Others whispered behind his back. One evening, 3 men sitting at a tea stall laughed openly. There goes the Carpenter again, one said mockingly. Saving the world, one hopeless cause at a time. Maybe he thinks she'll pay him back someday, another joked. More like he's wasting time on someone who will never recover, a third added with a smirk. Rafiq ignored them like he always did, but their words stung slightly, not because they insulted him, but because they insulted Syra, someone who had suffered more than enough already. Later that day, when he told Syra about the exercises she should practice, she noticed a change in his tone. It was faint, but she sensed it. Did someone say something to you? She asked gently. He hesitated, not wanting to burden her, but then he replied honestly, People talk. They don't understand why I'm helping you. Syra lowered her eyes, the sadness returning silently. I don't want your life to become harder because of me, she whispered. Rafiq moved closer and spoke softly. Your life matters, Sarah. Their words don't. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from the way he made her feel valued, something she had forgotten long ago. One day, a kind neighbor named Aisha stopped him on the road. She was one of the very few people who felt guilty about ignoring Sarah for so long. She handed Rafiq a small bag. Please give this to her, she said. It's fruit. I can't do much, but I can do this. Rafiq thanked her sincerely. It was a small gesture, but for him, it meant people were slowly seeing Syra as a human being again. When he delivered the fruit, Syra smiled and said, Maybe people are changing. Maybe, Rafiq replied, or maybe they're learning from your strength. As the days passed, he finally managed to gather enough money to cover half of her old medical bill. It wasn't enough for treatment yet, but it was progress. Every night he worked late, and every morning he brought nourishing meals that helped her heal. One afternoon, when he helped her out into the sunlight, she looked at the warm sky and breathed deeply, her eyes closed, enjoying the fresh air on her face. For the first time in months, she felt the sun fully. The world outside didn't feel as frightening with Rafiq beside her. He pushed her gently in a wooden wheelchair he had repaired for her. You should see sunlight more often, he said. It will help your body and mind. She nodded slowly. I never thought I would leave that room again. Rafiq smiled quietly. We're just getting started. That moment became a turning point. Each day, Syra looked forward to their slow walks outside. People around the neighborhood began to watch quietly. Some even nodded politely, finally realizing she was a person with a life and feelings, not a forgotten shadow. As her emotional healing grew, Rafiq noticed her eyes had gained a new spark, something fragile but real. She wasn't just surviving now, she was living. And every time she practiced a new movement, every time she gained a little more strength, and every time she smiled after months of sadness, Rafiq felt the same thought rising inside him. Helping her was no longer a duty, it had become his purpose. The final weeks of Syra's recovery became some of the busiest days of Rafiq's life. He worked more jobs than ever before, earning every extra coin he could. His hands were rougher, his clothes more worn, but his determination never faded. After many long nights, he finally collected enough money to clear the rest of Syra's old medical bills. When he placed the folded notes on the clinic counter, the nurse hesitated for the first time. She seemed surprised that someone would go so far for a woman everyone else had forgotten. Without another word, she approved Saira's treatment and wrote down referral papers for therapy. Rafik hurried back to Saira's home that evening, holding the papers like they were something precious. When he entered the room, she noticed the hopeful expression on his face and asked, "Did something good happen?" He held the papers out to her, smiling gently. "You're officially approved. Starting next week, you can begin proper therapy." Saira stared at the papers with trembling hands. "You paid everything?" "It had to be done," he said softly. "You deserve a chance to heal." Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed the papers to her chest. "I never thought I would see this day," she whispered. "I thought I would spend the rest of my life on this bed, waiting for time to pass." Rafik sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb her legs. "Not anymore. We're moving forward now." From that moment, everything began to change. Therapy was difficult for Saira. Some days she cried from frustration because her legs still felt stiff and heavy. Other days she made tiny improvements, a small twitch in her toes, a little more movement in her knee, a bit of balance with Rafik's help. He never let her feel discouraged. Every small victory he celebrated, and every struggle he shared with gentle encouragement. The house itself transformed little by little. Rafik fixed the entire roof, rebuilt the window frames, polished the floorboards, and even painted the old walls a soft, calming color. When Saira first saw the freshly painted room, she covered her mouth in shock. "It looks like someone else's home," she said in disbelief. "It looks like your home," Rafik corrected. "A safe one." She touched the smooth wall, smiling softly. "I didn't know a place could feel warm like this again." Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. For many months before Rafik arrived, she had been used to silence, loneliness, and fear. Now she had someone to talk to every day, someone who listened with patience and kindness. As she grew emotionally stronger, the town began to notice her transformation as well. At first, people watched from afar. They still didn't fully understand how a paralyzed woman they had ignored was suddenly appearing outside with a bit of strength, a bit of color returning to her face, and a hint of courage in her eyes. Some felt embarrassed for their past behavior. Others quietly admired Rafik's dedication. One morning, as he pushed her wheelchair down the road for exercise, an older woman from a nearby house stepped forward and said, "I'm glad to see you getting better, child." It was the first kind word Saira had heard from a stranger in years. She smiled shyly and thanked her. Later, two children approached to offer her flowers they had collected from a field. "We wanted to give you these," the little girl said nervously. Saira accepted the flowers with a warm smile, holding them close like a treasure. Rafik watched the moment quietly, feeling a small ache of happiness in his chest. It was the first time he saw Saira surrounded by kindness instead of fear. Therapy sessions continued week after week. Rafik often accompanied her, learning how he could help at home. He listened carefully to the therapist's instructions, how to support her legs, how to help her practice gentle stretches, how to encourage her without pushing too hard. He became her unofficial assistant, always ready to help, but never making her feel helpless. During one session, the therapist noticed something surprising. "Her muscles are waking up faster than expected," she said. "She may be able to stand with support soon." The words struck Saira like lightning. She had dreamed of that possibility, but never truly believed it could happen. Rafik's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You hear that?" he asked softly. "We're getting close." Over the next few days, they practiced new exercises. Rafik supported her under her arms, guiding her carefully as she tried to shift her weight onto her legs. At first, she trembled terribly, and fear flooded her expression. "I can't," she whispered. "You can try," he said gently. "Just 1 second today. That's enough." With his steady support, she managed to stand for a brief moment, 1 second, then 2, then 3. Each time her courage grew. Each time Rafiq's smile widened. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult session, she leaned back on the bed with tears in her eyes. "I never imagined I would stand again," she whispered. "You gave me back something I thought was lost forever." Rafiq didn't respond immediately. He simply placed a reassuring hand near hers and said, "You did it. I only helped." As Saira gained more strength, Rafiq decided she needed a better living space, something clean, bright, and comfortable. He found a small old house a few streets away that no one used anymore. The owner agreed to let him repair it in exchange for a small monthly rent. Rafiq accepted immediately. For 2 weeks straight, he worked from sunrise to sunset to transform the small house into a safe home. He replaced the broken roof tiles, fixed the door, installed sturdy shelves, and made ramps so Sarah could move around easily. He washed the floors, repainted the walls, and even built a wooden frame for a new bed. When everything was ready, he brought Sarah to the new house in her wheelchair. She looked around with wide, emotional eyes. "Is this for me?" she asked in disbelief. "For us to work on your recovery properly," he said gently. "You deserve a place where you can heal without fear." She pressed a hand to her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. "I never thought anyone would treat me with this much kindness." "It's not kindness," he said softly. "It's what any person should have done." Inside the new home, she found a small bookshelf he built, a soft chair near the window where she could sit in the sunlight, and a clean kitchen with fresh utensils. Everything felt new, peaceful, and full of possibility. Over the following weeks, her progress became even more remarkable. She learned to lift herself into a sitting position without help. She learned to move her legs slightly. She learned to stand for a few seconds while holding on to the wooden support he built. Each improvement brought a smile to her face, and every smile brought warmth to Rafiq's heart. One evening, while he helped her practice walking with the handmade walker, she took a shaky step forward. Then another. Her legs trembled, but she moved. She reached the edge of the room before collapsing back into his support. She looked up at him with tears of joy. "I walked," she whispered. "I actually walked." "Yes," he said with a quiet, emotional voice. "You did." She held the walker tightly, tears still falling. "You gave me back my life, Rafiq. I can never thank you enough." He looked at her gently. "You don't have to thank me. Your strength did this." The town's attitude changed completely. People who once avoided her now greeted her warmly. Neighbors who once whispered gossip now offered help. Even children waved at her happily whenever she passed by with Rafiq. One morning, as she practiced walking a few steps outside with her walker, a small group of neighbors gathered and clapped softly, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a sincere, respectful way. Saira blushed and smiled, feeling something she had not felt in years: acceptance. Through all of it, Rafiq remained by her side. He didn't care about attention or praise. He didn't care what people thought. All he wanted was to see her heal, grow, and live again. Months later, on a quiet evening, as she managed to walk from the bedroom to the living room using her walker, she turned to him with a trembling smile and said, "I am not abandoned anymore." Rafiq looked at her, his eyes gentle. "You never will be again." Saira's journey from being abandoned and forgotten to becoming hopeful and independent was not a miracle. It was the result of patience, love, trust, and the courage to help when no one else would. And Rafiq, the quiet carpenter who cared more than anyone expected, became the symbol of what true humanity looks like.